Good afternoon, everyone. This is a Prescott City Council study session. Today is Tuesday, August 23rd. Roll call, please.
Mayor Good.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rusing.
Here.
Councilman Montoya.
Here.
Councilman Moore.
Here.
Councilman Tenney will be back in a moment, and the record will reflect that Councilman Sishka is absent from the meeting.
We do have a quorum, but this is a study session, so we're not going to be taking any action. So first item on the agenda is
Presentation and discussion regarding public safety retention, recruiting, and readiness.
All right. While he takes care of that, I just want to thank you on behalf of myself, Fire Chief Dura, and Brandon Nunez from HR for taking the opportunity to hear what we have to say today and helping us work through some challenges and also some opportunities. So I was thinking a lot about today and what we were going to talk about and what the headline would be, and here's what I hope it is after we're done with today, that as a city, as a community, we're leaning into the opportunity to get ahead of the looming shortage of public safety professionals that's coming our way. So today we're going to start by discussing a general workforce kind of picture, what we're looking at, specific trends in recruitment and retention, including some survey data. We're going to provide an overview of police and fire department-specific trends that could impact our future staffing limitations and service providing, and also request feedback from you on policies and direction and considerations that we might need to address at later voting meetings. We really hope to show you the big picture and help you really understand what it is that we're facing. So with that, I would invite Brandon Nunez to come on up.
So, good afternoon, Mayor Council. Brandon Nunez, HR Director. So, just like Chief Bonnie said, today we're going to talk about we're going to have a discussion on the general workforce and public safety specific trends in recruitment and retention. Then, secondly, we'll give an overview of the police and fire department specific needs that could impact future staffing limitations. And then third, we're going to request feedback from the council on the major point and solicit policy level insights and possible further direction for consideration. My job, I'm going to data you to death here with some general HR trends. So I'm going to kick that off first with some market data. This is the current U.S. employment market that we're currently living in. Since 2019, the U.S. is experiencing historically low unemployment rates. The unemployment rate is currently 3.5%. The Arizona unemployment rate is actually lower than that. It's 3.3%. Along with that, the Department of Labor estimates that there are more jobs available today than there are job seekers. I saw the data today, and they actually estimate that there's 2.1 jobs for every job seeker. And then according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of U.S. job openings is near 10.7 million, and that's the highest level in the history of these statistics, which they began tracking in December of 2000. And along with that, we have an average of 4 million workers per month quitting their jobs, and that was in 2021. I know I just threw some information at you. If you would like a visual, here's a snapshot of U.S. job openings in the past 10 years, and you can see we're at the apex of that. So that's current U.S. job openings or vacancies in the country. And then combined with that, you have historically low unemployment rates. That's a 20-year snapshot right there. And then what we have here is the number of workers who are quitting per month in the country. So those blue lines there are the average over the past 20 years. That orange line is 2021. So we have more people quitting per month than ever in the country. So if you throw those ingredients in together, what you have is the Great Resignation, as it's been termed. All three of those factors have led the most complex and competitive employment market in the modern history of the workforce statistics. It's been coined many terms. It's been called the Great Resignation. It's been called the Great Reevaluation. I've seen it be called the Great Reassessment, where people are kind of thinking about different job opportunities and reevaluating their life. So that's what we've been dealing with as a country, and the impact that we've seen here at the city. I want to talk through those numbers right now. So we've had increased turnover, we've seen less applicants, and we have more recruitment activity. So you can see at the top there, our turnovers increased by 6% compared to our historical 5-year numbers. Top 3 reasons for people leaving: pay, career changes, career opportunities, and a lot of people are retiring.
Brandon, this is for the entire city staff.
That's for the full city, and then what I'll talk about here in the next couple slides are the impact on police and fire.
Okay.
And then overall as a city, we're seeing 21% less applications per year, and we've seen that trend over the past 3 years, and more recruitment activity more than ever. I had black hair until I became the HR director 4 months ago, and now I have white hair because of that number right there. We used to have about 12 postings per month on average here at the city. We now, over the past 2 years, we're averaging 48 postings per month. I looked today, we have 40 positions that we're actively posting, recruiting for, and scheduling interviews for. So that's the impact it's had on the city in general. But let's talk about police and fire, because they've actually seen this problem intensified compared to our other departments. So if you look at the fire department turnover, it used to be 4 in that people would leave the fire industry. For example, in 2017, their turnover percentage is 1.6%. It was a retirement. Compare that to right now. We're still in August. Their turnover is at 6.7%. Last year, they lost 10% of their workforce. The top 3 factors for leaving were pay, career change, and retirement. And then in terms of application reduction, they've seen it. They used to average about 91 qualified applications per posting. They're down about 55. And that's a 3-year trend. Police, it's even more significant. Their turnover the past 5 years has been over 10%. Right now, as of August, they're at 14.2%, which is a high number for us. The top 3 factors for leaving for the past 3 years is pay, career change, and retirement. I put a star next to career change because that's kind of where we're at. I know Chief Bonnie's going to talk about this, but we're just quite frankly not getting people interested in the job. And if you look at the applicant reduction from the year 2017 to 2019, we would get about 46 qualified applicants per posting. Right now, we're getting 12, and that's a pretty rough number. It's a difficult position to be in to hire police officers when we're getting 12 qualified applicants per posting. We did a testing this weekend. We had 6 people show up, 3 people passed our testing, so the numbers are decreasing significantly. So
what's the asterisk on career change?
We're seeing more folks in the police department change a career. That's the trend, that people are leaving the department specifically for that. And that's just a change we're seeing around the country. And she's going to talk a little bit about the national trends, but just quite frankly, a career change when we've looked at the past 5 years, that's been the top factor for leaving. Okay. This is the last slide I have. So what we want to do is we want to look at the salary comparisons for the Prescott Police Department. We're right dead in the middle. We offer a very competitive wage in terms of the other departments. But if you look at the slide here, between Sedona, Prescott Valley, Prescott Police Department, Chino Valley, and Yavapai County, we're right in the middle. And I know that one of our solutions that we're going to ask for is we want to be the leader in the region. We used to be the leader in the region, and so that's a potential solution. But we'll talk about that as we get further in this presentation. Holger made 1,000 slides here, so we've got a little bit until we reach the end of this presentation. So with that being said, Holger will get into those slides right now with the public safety survey.
All right, Holger Durer, Fire Chief. I'll try to make this as fast as I can. To paint the national picture, we sent a survey out a couple weeks ago. And first of all, let me tell you, this is non-scientific. So it was distributed through law enforcement, fire, as well as public administration websites. And anybody that wanted to take the survey took. Now, the thing that really is somewhat interesting is within 3 days, we got 200 responses. Now, as part of my graduate studies and other things, I've sent out surveys before, and that is quite a quick rate in a short amount of time. And we also got a lot of follow-up emails when we sent the survey results out indicating that a lot of folks are having this issue. And that's really the take-home message before we get into the data. This is a national problem. This is not just the city of Prescott. So a couple of things here just to give you an idea. We actually have over 200 responses now, but when we did these slides, 188 responses were received. This just gives you a quick breakdown. Most of them are city and county in terms of their governance structure, some special district and authorities, and then it kind of peters off into the private. The others are mainly tribal entities in the state of Arizona. That's at 5.41% there at the bottom. Some interesting things that really paint a picture here is a large majority of the respondents reported that they're currently facing some type of recruiting or retention challenges. And 81.6% said that they experienced moderate, significant, or severe impact of those recruiting challenges compared to 10 years ago. We have anecdotally always said in public safety, boy, the picture has changed. This is an indicator that that's happened nationwide. So a couple of things that really impact that is service delivery, right? And so keep in mind, this is not filtered by law or fire. This is combined law, fire, and EMS, basically public safety all together. And you can see here that, you know, the range of folks having some type of open position has increased significantly too. I'd love to be able to do this longitudinally and see what it was like 10, 20, 30 years ago. But I can tell you from gut experience that that is very unusual to have departments that report, you know, upwards of 21 to 30% openings that they can't currently fill. And that is definitely an experience, particularly on the law enforcement side, that we're experiencing here that matches the national trends. So speaking of national trends, what's going on here? When we group this, really the biggest thing is lack of applicants and low retention coming together to form this perfect storm. There are some folks that are seeing only low retention or only recruiting challenges. Those are a little bit less, but of course, in the end, it has the same impact. High retirement rate, low pay, high cost of living, those are on this survey, but they were really not, like I said, this is where it's not scientific. I'm sure that the low retention rates do have something to do with some of the factors that we're seeing here on our exit interviews. But again, we didn't have the time to really dig down to that level. Some initiatives that others are doing, and this is kind of all over the place. Some folks are looking at lateral hires, doing what are called green recruit academies. So for instance, here, firefighters have to come with a firefighter 1 and 2 cert to apply. There's plenty of places in the country that are in-housing that academy and hiring for character and training for skill, which I think is a very good approach in general anyway, in terms of the kind of firefighter you get on the back end. A lot of enhanced benefits, things like gym access, wellness clinics, high school summer camps for recruiting, really looking at increasing pay for market competition. We can talk about that as a separate issue because I know that is definitely a public policy issue that we need to talk about. There's departments that are now hiring full-time recruiters that are simply doing that as their main job, is to look for public safety candidates. Some folks are paying for fuel if some members are making under current wage because there's a lot of commuting going on. Now, I do want to touch on that really quickly. One of the things that makes Prescott unique in terms of the public safety community is that it's hometown folks protecting their hometown. If we start encouraging a lot of commuting, that starts diluting that factor, and that impact on our culture is real, and it's definitely a concern that both Chief Bonney and I share. Some folks are looking at speed in hiring. Back in the day when I got on the fire department in the late 90s, early 2000s, it took me 2.5 years to get on the job because I sat on a list for 2.5 years. That is a foreign concept at this point because the speed with which the competition is going on, there's poaching in public safety going on of saying, I can get you the job faster, and next thing you know, that candidate is gone. Increased outreach, obviously. Plenty of sign-on bonuses. We're seeing that particularly on the police side. Take-home cars. for police officers, housing down payment assistant. We'll talk about salary compression a little bit later. Work schedule adjustments. So, for instance, we're starting to see a younger generation not necessarily being that adept to shift work. And, you know, in the fire department, when you spend literally a third of your life plus at work, that is something that people are starting to adjust as well. And then finally, significant focus on employee relations. I think here in Prescott we have it fairly lucky, but there's definitely some other places where there's a lot of ground to make up there. And I'll tell you, as a fire chief, there's always work that I can do to make sure that our employee relations are healthy and productive. A couple take-home points, obviously. Focus on recruitment. We definitely need to make sure that we get smarter and more effective there. Prescott is not unique, as I mentioned. These impacts are national, regional, and local. And then the regional impacts is the biggest thing that I really saw as a take-home point here is the competition in the valley for public safety workers is extraordinarily fierce. And I am concerned that that's a harbinger of things to come for here, the Quad City area. So for instance, you probably know that there's a district tax initiative for fire departments on the books. That would probably have the impact that Kaufman would grow significantly and be competing with us for firefighter staffing. You know, there's a limited pool of applicants, and when we're competing with both agencies, now, granted, the relationship between us and CAFMA are good, and we're not doing any cutthroat things to each other, but it's still a limited pool of applicants, and we've got to be aware of that. So the other thing is really proactivity versus reactivity, and we really want to make sure, as Chief Bonnie said, this is not a the sky is falling presentation. This is a public policy information session for you all to understand what we as your SMEs recommend, and one of those is to get proactive around this rather than to wait for the trend to come to us. So obviously, if we don't take action, here are some things that are really on the horizon for us. A lack of staffing. In the fire department, we're seeing a significant amount of mandatory overtime. That impacted us directly during the Crooks fire, and the reason why we were able to offset that is our relationship with the Forest Service to bring some surge staffing into the city, because we had run out of the ability to basically staff a severity unit on our own because of the amount of overtime impacts that we had. The fatigue and burnout is real. It is not just subjective. That is definitely a factor that we're seeing, not just here in Prescott, but definitely all across the country. And then the other piece is the increased incentivization. Really, it's going to start displacing general fund revenues. And I will not stand here letting you know that as the fire chief, there's a significant portion of the general fund that comes the way of the fire department. And if we're talking about public safety salaries, that's a displacement of general funds, which is really where you as the council and the city manager come in to have that conversation with our recommendations. I don't want it to come across to say, I'm pounding my fist on the table, you've got to do this. That's not what this is about. This is about engaging in an ongoing dialogue that will take us quite a while to fix. This is not just a flick this switch and the problem goes away. So with that, Chief Bonnie's here to talk a little bit about police-specific trends.
So I definitely appreciated all the data that we were able to collect from that survey. It really did help paint the picture that this is indeed a national trend and something that we need to pay attention to. However, as we've spoken about many times, our responsibility is here in Prescott. And so I really want to help you understand, first of all, how did we get here? And what are we doing about it? And what kinds of recommendations do we have? And how is this impacting our ability to provide quality service to our community? So, of course, you can imagine the past couple of years have been extremely challenging for us in public safety. You know, what was supposed to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve has turned into 2+ years, where during this time, the strain on our public safety professionals has been extreme. They were the ones that were working 24/7, 365 when a majority of businesses were shut down or at least limited in their ability to provide services. And as you can imagine, when you have an organization, public safety organization that runs 24/7, 365, the demands on them become very, very real very, very quickly. Couple that with all the civil unrest that we saw and the narrative that's being painted across our country, there are so many factors that impact people's desire to get into public service. And this isn't just an issue that's facing us, that we're facing in the police department. We're seeing this with the military as well. The military's struggling to recruit people. And what we're trying to do is get ahead of this curve and really figure out what we can do here to prevent it from impacting us even more than it already has. So I want to talk to you a little bit about policing in Prescott and how important it is for me and our command staff and for all of us that serve in your police department to be extremely cognizant of the quality of candidates that we select. And our community expects and demands and should expect and demand high-quality professional public safety services and partnerships. And over the years at the police department, we really have built those relationships. Our community relies on us. We rely on them. And one of my concerns is that with this changing landscape, we're going to lose footing in those relationships that we have. We're starting to see a decrease in the amount of services that we're able to provide. If you look behind you, sorry, Lieutenant Kassoon, you'll see Lieutenant Kassoon has been here for council meetings because we've pulled a lot of resources in to cover our patrol teams. That's important. So policing changes every single day, and that's the thing that we all love about it, but it's also one of the challenges. And again, just with the national narrative, we really are struggling to find people that are willing to step into those roles, and we have to be very aware of the type of people that we're sending to the doors of our community members. We always want to make sure that we provide extremely high-quality public safety services with people that are equipped with servants' hearts to make those important decisions in our community. So one of the challenges that we have that's very unique to law enforcement is that it takes about a year, and I'm going to guess about $100,000, give or take a few, to train a new police officer. We can't just pluck them from the shelves. We have to recruit them. We have to train them. We're looking at different creative ways that we can train them, regional academies, so that we have a more constant supply of recruits coming out of academies. And if we want to maintain the quality of life that we have here, we have to be forward-thinking and think about those things a little bit differently than we ever have. We have a wonderful police academy here at NARDA. We have great partnerships, but they run twice a year, and so we have to get creative about where we're training people. And that could mean sending recruits to Valley Police Academies. It could mean, does mean right now, using Flagstaff Academy that's going to start in October, and just being as creative as we possibly can. And the thing here is that, as Brandon talked about, we are competitive with salary, but we need to be a leader in the region. And I think if we want to retain the people that we have, if we want to recruit the very best candidate that we can, we have to lead the pack. We can't just run with it anymore. So a little bit about that. So we have seen a drastic decrease in applicants, and Brandon touched on that. We have vacancies right now that we can't fill. I had hoped to bring positive news to you from our testing this weekend, but as he indicated, I don't know how successful we're going to be. We had 3 people that passed our written and our physical testing, and we'll see what happens in backgrounds from there. And nationwide, the trend is people are simply stepping away. As those charts indicated before, we talk about career changes. I've got officers, and it's happening all over the country, but officers that are simply just stepping away from our profession. They're done serving in this capacity. The risk is not worth the reward anymore, and so we have to get ahead of that a little bit and think about what we're going to do. All agencies across the state are siphoning from the same pool of candidates that do want to serve. And so when we look at maintaining the high quality of candidates that we have, really retaining those people that want to serve in policing, we have to make Prescott the absolute most attractive place that we possibly can to those candidates. Right now, Prescott, I don't know if somebody was in the Valley, if they were to be looking at a place to serve in a police department, if they would look here. Our cost of housing is a challenge for all of those in the service industry. It's not just public safety, but it is a contributing factor to why people choose to serve in Prescott and why people choose to stay in Prescott. If they can't find a place to live, of course, it's going to be a challenge for them. So we have to put ourselves on the menu, and we have to make ourselves an option for those folks. So I want to let you know a little bit about some of the things that we have already done in order to be able to maintain our service levels. We changed from a really favorable 6-squad schedule that allowed us to do some training on days that we had some extra coverage, back to a schedule that provides 5-squad coverage, still 24/7, 365, of course. But it does mean a little bit less training, greater utilization of PTO, and as Fire Chief Dura alluded to, people are on overtime, they're getting burnt out, and they're struggling right now. They're working a lot. We have pulled people from specialty positions such as community service and traffic enforcement and investigations to cover patrol. As you know, our priority is patrol, and when somebody calls 911 and wants a police officer, I want to be able to send them a police officer. What that means for us, however, is that during these months where it's important to have public safety presence downtown, we don't have the teams on bicycles that normally greet our visitors. We don't have those teams on bicycles necessarily patrolling our parks. They are covering patrol, and they're answering calls. And the reason I thought it was important to let you know that it takes a year to train a police officer is because it's going to take a little bit of time to get us out of this, right? So when I say we want to make ourselves attractive and put ourselves on the menu, that means for laterals as well. Lateral police officers are a fantastic resource for us. We can plug them in between getting them backgrounded and testing and training, usually between 4 to 5 months. So they're a great resource for us if we can become attractive to some of them. So we continue at this rate. If we don't do anything, then my question to you will be what kinds of services are acceptable for us and what level of service is acceptable for us here in this community. And I'll be looking to you. And I work for you. I work for this community. And I firmly believe this community expects the partnerships that we've already created and expects us to provide quality, professional public safety services. And right now, we just don't have anybody on the injured reserve. That's the other challenge that we have, right? We have somebody who gets hurt. Our bench is not deep enough for us to be able to pull from that bench. So we need that capacity to be able to not only hire people, but also retain the awesome public servants that we have right now. And so I just want to paint the picture because as Fire Chief Dura mentioned, they're all pulling from the same pool of people, and the competition in the valley is extremely fierce. So the Phoenix Police Department just put out this ad right here, and what you can see is the pay and benefits there. And what really struck me is that Phoenix police officers could retire at more than we're paying our officers right now. And that's a challenge for us. I recognize our resources are limited. We're not the same. But I think what would make a big difference from our policymakers is if we were committed, if we as a community made a concerted effort and a very vocal and public statement that we will prioritize our public safety and put the safety of this community first. I think that would mean a great deal and become the leader in the region that we once were while working for parity with larger agencies that are taking our officers away. So I will turn this over to Chief Dura for some fire trends, and then we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, so very similar, just what's the impact on the fire department? It is slightly different, but just some background. Our daily shift staffing right now is 17 folks with 2 additional coverage positions for each shift. Now, the other thing to understand there is that we authorize 2 vacations per day because we have to minimum staff, which means that those 2 additional coverage positions are instantly taken. So if somebody has a long-term injury need, if we're sending somebody out on a wildfire, if we need to send somebody to training, that automatically incurs overtime. And that's, to some extent, programmatic and expected, and that's normally how fire departments operate. Some overtime on a fire department roster is not only normal, it's good governance. But that being said, as we mentioned, that is starting to outstrip our ability to staff. And let's talk a little bit more about how that's impacting us. So we have seen a significant increase in mandatory overtime, and I apologize. I wanted to get this trend out there exactly, objectively, by numbers. We can get that for you, but it's going to take me a little bit of time digging through rosters because I wanted the information to be accurate rather than just up on the screen. So our alternative response unit has had to be temporarily reassigned to cover long-term vacancies. We've had one of our long-term employees currently on about a 6-month knee injury. That requires us to slide resources around, and the priority obviously is to staff the fire engines. So we had to take some of those measures. Now, again, I want to make sure that you understand we are committed to low acuity call response in the long term, but in the short term, we've had to make some staffing adjustments just like police had. We've seen that significant reduction in applicant pools. I've done some asking around with our longer term members. We used to see 300 to 350 applicants for firefighter opening. We just saw, as Brandon mentioned, 55, and that led to a list of 12 to start from, of which we've lost 2 to other departments. That speed of recruitment that I was talking about. And that's why we're actively talking about green academies right now and in-housing those academies. Of course, that takes resources too, so the problem is complex. The growth that we're
define
seeing
that?
here in the quads, yes, sir.
Chief, can you define green academies?
Yes, absolutely. So we're taking somebody that does not have any public safety certifications and training them in-house while they're on payroll. And there's a definite benefit to that, which is we get to influence the way that they provide that service based on our philosophy rather than coming from somewhere else. The drawback to that is you have to figure out a way and the resources to flow that way. And you also want to make sure you don't lose those folks once you've trained them so you don't become the farm team for somebody else's fire department. And obviously the growth of the Quad City, I've already mentioned that is definitely increasing our issue because the competition for resources is increasing. Staffing history, this is a little bit of a historical dive here, but the real thing that I want to show here is as the population and the commensurate incident count has increased, our staffing has remained fairly flat. When Station 75 opened in late 95, we added obviously the staffing for that, and since then we've been anywhere between 54 and 57. We're currently at 61, that's with the additional ARU that you authorized during the last fiscal year, but that's still significant when you compare it to the trend of call volume and incident responses. What's not on here is the geographic dispersion of those calls. Obviously, in the North Prescott area, as we've talked about with public safety staffing locations, we're starting to also see an increase in response times that comes along with that. So those are some of the background numbers. The other thing I want to highlight is our administrative staffing. We in fire department tend to really talk about the big red trucks a lot, but the amount of support that it takes to deliver those services, to do community risk reduction, to do our wildland fuels mitigation programs, those are all captured in that administrative staffing. And comparatively, we are fairly thin when you look at us, compared to similar-sized fire departments, and that does increase some of the difficulty that we can respond to these trends with. So, how does this impact us, collectively here? First of all, those 8 SAFER grant positions that we're still waiting on, and Mark Woodfill and I had a conversation just recently about that. We still have not heard. We may not hear until early next year, calendar year, not fiscal year. So we're still holding off on that. And so there's a funding question that we need to chat with you about because those are 8 grant positions that we didn't ask because we wanted them. It's because we need them. And so the impact, specifically this mandatory overtime, it impacts the ability to reliably staff the ARU on and on and on. But let's talk about the immediate future. We've talked about 2 new stations and the relocation of a third. Now, the relocation of the third isn't really going to have that significant impact on staffing. It will have some, but since we have that engine company already on the books, it's not quite as significant. But Station 76 and 77, the 2 that we proposed for the North Prescott area, will require approximately 12 positions per station. So that's 3 per truck plus a coverage position for those vacations, long-term leaves, long-term injuries. We also need growth in our support staff. Now, before we talk about making this an official budget request, I want to remind you that we're currently starting to engage in phase 2 of our strategic plan, and that strategic plan is going to have a workforce component of this so that there's stakeholder engagement, there's good objective data as to what we're trying to fill with those 40-hour positions. But we're working on dedicated fire marshal services to increase customer service to our building community. We're looking at increasing our wildfire mitigation coordination, so we have a strategic position that's able to interface with the Forest Service in the state so that our mitigation efforts are as effective as possible. We need additional training staffing, particularly if we're going to consider in-housing a green academy, and then obviously that administrative and logistics support. If you add that all up over the next 5 to 10 years, that's 36 to 40 new FTE in the fire department alone, and we haven't even talked about a third of the department that's nearing retirement age. So when we're talking about that recruitment and retention effort, there is the data problem that we're facing, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of this trend with all of you. So it's not in 3 or 4 fiscal years out we are screaming foul. This is meant to be a strategic type conversation because of that. So a couple things to close here. Some possible solutions. Obviously, we're not just going to bring you a dead cat without a shovel. We want to make sure that we perform a staffing needs analysis and assess the market and look really strategically at what's going on. We're going to talk a little bit to you about recruitment and retention flexibility, both for us as well as the city manager. We want to make sure that we define a realistic market position based on the current realities. Innovation is huge with this. Work policies, benefits, programs. That's really where us as your SMEs come in as the department directors, of making sure that we have a healthy employee culture that's innovative, that's looking at things that maybe some other workplaces don't to attract and retain employees. We want to make sure we think comprehensively. I'm definitely going to tell you that just say a pay increase or a recruitment drive by itself isn't going to do it. We're going to have to make sure that it's comprehensive and it's that plan, do, check, act cycle constantly. And then obviously investing. Culture and people and attitude, and that's how I'll finish. I'm a big believer, and I know Chief Bonnie and Brandon Nunez share this, that workplace culture makes a significant impact. The number on the pay stub, yes, it is important. But at the end of the day, it's how our public safety responders feel supported, feel led, and that is definitely something we're taking on quite seriously every day. So with that, we're ready for your questions. And there's some questions that we have of you, but we'll kind of defer to you at this point.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the detailed presentation that both Chief Bonnie, Chief Dura, and Brandon did. And I appreciate you guys being proactive about this. I think it's really helpful. Obviously, there's national headwinds that we're facing in this issue, and I think it's, to Brandon's point, it's probably not just within, specific police and fire. I'm sure this is a struggle that we're having throughout the entire city and even outside of into the private sector. I guess the way I am hearing this problem as you guys are presenting it today is that this is a problem that sounds like it's not necessarily dire at the moment, but is trending in that direction. Sir, bless you. And so I guess the other thing I heard was I heard some different possible solutions, and I wrote some notes down here. Salary changes, sign-on bonus incentives, a Green Academy or a Fire Academy or a Regional Academy, workforce housing as a component of maybe solving that. These all sound like various dials that we can turn. And so I guess when I think about this, my question to you guys as our subject matter experts in this area is, where do you think we can have the most impact short term? And what dials do you think are best for short term? And what dials maybe are ones that we should look at for more of a midterm solution? And what are ones that are long term? And I don't know if that's a fair way to ask that question or if that categorization makes sense, but it's just comes to mind for me.
Yeah, so I'll just address the police department, even though I can drive a fire truck, so maybe I can answer. So what the picture that I'd hoped to paint for you is, I don't know that dire is the right word, but I'm concerned.
Sure.
I'm concerned mostly for the people that we have working the streets right now. They are working to the bone. They're tired. And so my priority is on retention and keeping them. And that's why I'm so adamant about, as Chief Dura indicated, the feeling that they get from their elected and appointed leadership about, do they feel supported? Do they feel like what they do is of value to us and to our community? And that's why I think it is important immediately as we can to reposition ourselves back to being the leader in the region so that we keep the wonderful people we have. Okay.
So just to clarify, and I'm grateful for that, and I think you'll find no opposition among this dais of people who want to support them and keeping with that. So if just to probe a little bit on that piece, are you saying that the biggest dial we can turn is compensation at this point for the short term?
I think it's the most impactful short-term fix. Recognizing I don't necessarily write those checks, right? I'm the kid coming to my parents saying I need a new pair of shoes. I get that. I'm telling you, I think that when we are the leader in the region, we will keep the people we have and recruit the very best people to fill those positions. also, as a department head, recognizing how important the other departments within the city are, looking for short or medium-term and long-term solutions so that we all have the opportunity to serve here in this community, and recognizing what our place is within that greater wheel.
So to follow up just a little bit, Amy, because I appreciate everything you're saying, and I just want to get my arms around this a little bit. So I hear you saying the biggest dial that we can turn in the short term is bring our compensation structure up so that we are the leader in the region, and I would tend to agree based on your presentation.
Correct.
What would you suggest is a dial that we can turn in the midterm?
So midterm, HR is very, very creative, looking at what benefits we can offer regionally and looking at how we can set ourselves apart. And they've looked at some really creative things, and I'll let Brandon talk about that, to set the city, not just public safety, but set us as a city apart from any other employer. We recognize we want our toilets to flush and our trash to be picked up, so we have to consider those folks as well. They are critical to our way of life as well. So thinking about creative benefit packages and creative ways that we can be different. We've talked about everything from down payment assistance to daycare centers. I mean, you name it, I think we've talked about it. We're totally open to suggestions and ideas. But just what we can do, like I said, to set ourselves apart. Long term, I believe there are some fixes that we need to make, and I'd spoken with the mayor about this several days ago, probably to our pension system that really is hampering our ability to keep people. The Tier 3 has been a bit of a challenge because of the way that it's structured, and that's a legislative change that is going to take a long time to turn that dial.
From the fire perspective, I'd say the most immediate thing that we can do is to have this conversation today. I think by putting this up on the surface and having an ongoing public policy debate about this, I think that's the most responsive and responsible thing to do, because that way people know we're on it. We share this issue, and we will figure out a way to solve it. I would agree the most immediate next step is to focus on the workforce that we have. That is such an important thing. It's much easier for us to retain an employee that we've already trained, that understands our policies, than to find a new one. This is not a profession anymore that you can just simply say, I'll just hire another one, put them through the academy, and we're good. That is definitely does not meet, I know, your expectations. It does not meet my expectations, and most importantly, it doesn't meet our citizens' expectations. Moderate, it's kind of like the middle time frame here. For us as the fire department, I think the green academies are a huge component of this. To be able to change the game in terms of the available applicants, that's going to make the biggest difference.
And to that end, you mentioned we have a good, or that the Prescott Fire Department has a good working relationship as it exists right now with CAFMA.
Correct.
Do you think that there's an opportunity for that Green Academy to be a regional cooperation? And have you talked to Chief Freitag or, about that component of that?
Yes, and absolutely, that those conversations at the staff level have already started to say logistically how would that work. But I would even say expand that even further to departments that are in the entire region. Regional fire academies are tricky. Plenty of places have done it successfully, and I'm sure we could do it here too. But yes, Chief Freitag definitely shares these concerns, shares these ideas of a regionalization. The one thing that I'll mention for sure about that is I want to make sure we maintain Prescott identity around those factors. That's really important for me, but I think we'd be foolish not to engage in increasing the pool, particularly around the instructor staffing that it requires to pull an academy like that off.
And then the last question for you, Holger. You mentioned that you're in phase 2 of the strategic planning regarding the workforce housing. Can you talk more about what that means?
Yeah, so this spring and early summer, we focused on an organizational identity part of our strategic plan, and we'll present that to you actually fairly shortly. We've finalized that now. But phase 2 for our plan is the more metrics-driven, objective goals and objectives type of plan. We've actually engaged with a different consulting team than we did for the first phase, specifically because we wanted a metric-driven plan, and I'm anticipating that one of the major areas of focus for that will be workforce development. And under that umbrella, there will not only be organizational structural recommendations, but also recruitment, retention components of that. So this is not just a fly-by-night conversation. I really want to make sure that we deliver you good metrics with good long, medium, and short-term outcomes rather than just outputs. So,
Thank you.
Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really know how to phrase this. I'm going to try. one of the comments that came up even earlier today when we were interviewing candidates for the appointment process to City Council was how, as a community, we lose a lot of our young people. They graduate from high school and they leave our community. And it would seem that we have this tremendous resource of a great high school here in town. Are there any programs where we could have like junior officers in police and fire where we could start these kids when they're 16, 17, 18 and do recruiting at a very early age where they can do ride-alongs, they can have experiences with the police department, with the fire department, our high school kids, and keep them in our community and provide wonderful jobs and meet a need for recruitment in our community and keep people here?
Yeah, so I'm actually a product of that, Councilman. So I was an explorer when I was in high school here, and came right back here. So absolutely, we're exploring all of those options. We work closely with the JROTC at the high school. We know them. Our SRO that works up there is constantly working with those kids. And, you know, we've got a 4-year gap for a police officer. You can't be a certified police officer until you're 21. So we got to keep them on the hook from the time they graduate high school to the time that they're capable of being certified. So absolutely, those are wonderful programs that we seek to expand as much as we possibly can.
Is there something that a young person could do in that 3-year gap from the time they graduate from high school till they're 21 where they could be support staff or something where they're not a sworn officer, but you keep them in the system and then they can make their way up into being a sworn officer?
Absolutely. So the thing that I recommend the most and we recommend is starting in dispatch. That's a fantastic place for our folks to start. Gives them a very good overview of the way that public safety services work here in our community and gets them into the family and gets them into the system. So, yes.
So on the fire side, we also have an Explorer program. Conrad Jackson, who you might know, he coordinates that for us. It's extremely successful. To your point, we have that retention issue. Very similar. I would definitely echo what Chief Bonney just said. But it brings to mind a conversation I had last week, unfortunately in Colorado, but I went home real quick for a trip. But there was an 11-year-old girl that wanted to be a firefighter. And that's actually the age range I'm interested in targeting in is 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. I want both on the female firefighter side, I want them to see themselves as a firefighter, that's a profession that they can enter. And that conversation has to happen a lot before high school, really. But it's also the general pool of really getting those 10, 11, 12-year-old, basically kids that are my son's age, engaged in this now and not waiting. But with that, I want to put Brandon Nunez on the spot because he's truly, and I'm not saying this facetiously, the visionary around not just public safety, but really City of Prescott recruiting. So.
And Councilman Moore, I agree with your sentiments too about engaging the youth. I know I actually emailed Councilman Tenney about this a couple of weeks ago about breaking into the high schools a little bit more. We one of the biggest challenges we have here from a recruitment standpoint is we do need to capture the people who are already here because the cost of housing for people to come in it's not very doable. So that's where we want to spend most of our time. The problem with that, it's a long-term solution. So we're going to do that. I don't think we'll see the results of that for years because there are some certification requirements where folks have to be 21 years of age or what have you. So we can engage them early and get them interested. So I do look at that as a long-term solution and something we're willing to do and we are doing. So in the short term, we are doing quite a few things. I mean, we're pulling out all the tricks out of our hat. We're doing more testings. We're paying for more advertisement. We're doing something where we are going to make our application process more simple, where it's going to be a text to apply feature, where people can hop on their phone, they'll text a phone number and they can engage and complete their application just in a couple minutes. So we're actively trying to do more things, and I think those are some viable solutions. But we'll be up here again looking to do more things, and that's really the intent of our presentation is just to kind of plant the seed.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for starting this conversation. I would just like to ask our city manager, Mr. Lamar, to give us some of his insights on this topic. Thank you.
Sure, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm extremely supportive of the initiatives that Brandon's trying to implement, as well as what Amy and Holger are trying to do. And I think the pay element's a big element, but it's not an end-all, be-all when police positions, and to a lesser extent, fire positions, are less attractive from a societal perspective than they were even 5 to 10 years ago. 5 to 10 years ago, the idea that a person would dip their toe in the police water and pull it out in a year or two, I mean, Amy could speak to it, it just didn't happen. So one of the things we need to do beyond cash, and I wanted to talk about that for a minute too, but is find a way to communicate to potential law enforcement officers, and again, to a lesser extent, firefighters, what a pro-public safety community this is. Because the national perception doesn't hold water here. I mean, and that doesn't pay the bills. You still have to, be competitive from a wage perspective. But I don't know what kind of campaigning or public relations we need to do to express to people that aren't from here that this is a good place to be a cop or a firefighter. That's a big deal right now, because there's a lot of places it's not. Same with the money situation. You think about supply and demand. The sheriff is trying to staff a new jail, correct? How many positions is the sheriff down?
I think at least 150 from last time I heard.
Yeah.
But that's,
So, as you talk about supply and demand and you try to be the leader in the region, it's not going to be easy because you have a guy down the street that needs to staff a brand new facility and find 150 people to put it in. And that gets to be a problem when the end all be all is cash. Would you disagree with that?
no, I agree. And that's why I think a lot of these solutions are long-term. But I also know that across the country, officers are leaving, and I'm sure firefighters are leaving as well, when their elected officials in their communities say things like, let's defund the police department. And we definitely don't have that. But it is and it would be a very strong statement that I know would mean a lot to the people that serve this community if we would commit to being the leader in the region and just keep working. Like I said, putting ourselves on the menu is probably the best analogy that I can come up with, because when that small group of people looks at where they're going to serve, the first thing they're going to look at is how do they pay their mortgage, and then they're going to look at where is a good place to serve. Without a doubt, those of us that work in this community, those of us that serve at the police department, serve here because we love this community. Many of us grew up here. We bleed Prescott PD blue, and you're going to find those people no matter what. But we still need to continue to make that commitment to them, and we need to support them and be vocal about that support for them. One of the things I prepared before I came into this presentation was I said anecdotally, and I've said it many times, that the violence that our officers are facing has gone up, and the types of calls that our officers are responding to has changed. And so I had one of my folks pull that data, and I was shocked, because anecdotally I could tell you that the number of times prior to 2020 that I've heard of our police officers getting spit on, maybe a handful. It's almost every week. Almost every week. So as to Michael's point, things are changing. And between 2020 and 2021, the assaults on our police officers here in Prescott went up 100%. So we do need to make that vocal statement, and we need to make sure that those folks that are willing to put on this uniform are doing it for the right reasons, but also are feeling supported in their decision to serve.
And those societal trends are going to stop people from becoming cops. Mm-hmm. If you're getting that in Prescott's main streets, you're getting that in Phoenix's main streets. This is going to be a very difficult solution for communities throughout this country going forward. And I don't think neither of the chiefs is wrong. We're going to have to be very creative. Now, one good thing, we're going to have the pension debt at an even keel by the end of this calendar year. Talking about paying additional wages when we were chasing that wasn't really a realistic prospect. But without having some of the unfunded liability issues that this community has historically had, trying to be as competitive as humanly possible, the wages is much more viable.
Councilman Tenney?
Just some really brief thoughts. I know in talking with Brandon and with Chief Bonnie, and I haven't talked directly with Chief Dura about this, but the pay that we pay teachers, nurses, firefighters, police in this area, even if we were to go to the top of the region, it still doesn't match what housing costs are. So I know that our parallel discussions we've started to have recently regarding workforce housing will be a part of any medium or long-term solution here as well. Second, I'd like to echo what Councilman Moore said about schools. If you want to reach onesies and twosies here, head out to your charter schools, your homeschool folks. If you want to get with 87% of the young people in Prescott, let's get some more formal things going with the school district. And I know some people would be happy to work with you on that. It would be great. That's great for you. It's great for us. And it does what Councilman Moore is talking about, which is keep our great young kids in town. We'd love to see more of that. There's relatively few avenues for that. This is a perfect avenue for that. I think it's a win-win-win. So let's talk more about that.
Holger, what is the minimum age for a firefighter?
So at this point, it's kind of limited. Technically, we can employ somebody 18, but it takes time to train them. So we're kind of around that 20 to 21 age, too. I mean,
But I wonder if you got somebody interested in the global concept of a career in public safety, could you introduce them at a younger age to both the police and the fire, that if they land in the fire between the ages of 18 and 20, that's all well and good, but if you have them still interested in the field globally, could you transition them into being law enforcement if that's what they wanted to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make any sense?
You can definitely do that, and I think that's definitely a Prescott creative philosophy, because there's no competition between police and fire here other than joking ones. And so from that perspective, that I think I like that idea in general. The other component to think about here, though, is this. Both police and fire have turned from jobs into professions. Those professions require academic education. And so we have to figure out a way to crack the nut, not just to do certifications, but to do education as well. Because if we're planning on, when I hire a firefighter, I'm thinking about, is this going to be the next fire chief, the next deputy chief, the next battalion chief, the next captain? And that requires those folks to have that education. In addition, we also demand that. We want critical thinkers, not just task-level operators. And so there's something we have to think about there.
Yeah, and we have a tuition reimbursement program in getting them interested in career in law enforcement or a career in firefighting, and incentivizing it with tuition reimbursement, but getting them at an 18 to 19-year-old age.
Yes.
I think you give yourself a fighting chance.
I would agree.
And it sounds like, from what Clark's saying, that the school system would probably be more than happy for you guys to put your heads together and think about something.
Yeah, and I'm personally a product of that, actually, because the school system in Fort Collins, where I grew up, I took the EMT class my second semester in high school and got high school credit for it and graduated with an EMT certificate. So, but...
Very cool. And we could look at anything from informal, come by, do a career day presentation type of things, which we would love. Let's get that started with our 11-year-olds. And you probably know we've got a robust CTE program at the high school, 7 programs now, and then about 15 others that we can access through our CTED district. And I'm not sure the status of our public safety CTE program. We should probably look into that more and get that going. I'd love to work with the two of you on that. Last that I had, Mayor, just really quickly, is that this is coming more into perspective for me, what kind of a situation we're facing. If I were to ask for a show of hands, how many people in the room don't support our public safety officers? I think no one would raise their hand, right? But what does that mean? It's really easy. Almost every one of our candidates this morning stood up and said, yeah, I support the police, I support the fire department. Great. That's super easy to say, but it comes down to more than that, doesn't it? I'm hearing that we're going to need some resources. If we want a mediocre level of service, we should put mediocre resources into this. If we want a high level of service, we need to put high level of resources into this. Money doesn't always equal performance right away, but I'm hearing that's going to be a major part of the solution. And I think on a more broad scale, we're committed to open space. We're committed to terrific streets and to safe water and to other things. And I'm probably like you. I didn't wake up this morning thinking to myself, gee, I'd like to pay higher taxes, but additional revenue streams, and exploring those options are things that we may need to do. As conservative as I am, and as conservative as we are as a community, fiscally and otherwise, that's maybe some of the reality here that we're going to want to face together when we say, I support the police and the fire department. Okay, what's that mean? You ready for 3/4%? Let's talk about it.
Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to build on my earlier comment about recruitment, are you doing any recruiting with like people coming out of the military? I know oftentimes people will transition from military into law enforcement, and we have a VA here, and so that seems like a win-win if we could do some direct recruitment with young men coming out of the military. For example, I have a son-in-law who did 4 years in the Marines and left active military duty, but he would be a very good candidate perhaps for law enforcement or something like that after 4 years of service.
Yeah, it's a good question, and they're an ideal candidate for law enforcement. So we attend all military job fairs locally. We've done them throughout the state as well. We were working with a Army pays program, and our liaison for that actually joined the Great Resignation, and he left the Army, so that kind of fell to the wayside. But that's still in the queue. But you're right. That's an ideal candidate for law enforcement. And we engage in all their activities locally. So,
Okay. Thanks.
Very good. Any other additional questions or concerns? Do we have any public comment?
We do, Mayor. Patrick Kirkendall?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Pat Kirkendall, 5610 Hole in One. And I'm going to address this in my private life, not as the state veterans manager for Arizona. And what you're talking about, I've been to lots of presentations across Arizona. Everybody's facing it right now. My phone rings off the hook wanting to hire veterans. I attend the TAPS, I attend the Skill Bridge across at the 4 bases across Arizona, and we're just not seeing those applicants wanting to come out in law enforcement. But I did prepare something, and I'm going to use it just so it doesn't go to waste. All right. So thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes and voice my thoughts concerning public safety and the supporting of first responders in Prescott, Arizona. I'm Patrick Kirkendall and proud to have been born and raised here. In my civilian occupation, I am the Arizona State Veterans Manager for Workforce. Today I'm here as a resident. However, I will use some of my statewide workforce knowledge to enhance my thoughts. I am a proud veteran and I stand strong in my support for our police, fire, and first responders. I don't know of any veterans or those currently serving who would have left their families and their communities to serve our great nation if they didn't feel that their loved ones and neighbors were safe here on the home front. Therefore, Prescott largely supports its veterans population and why our veteran population stands strong and proud for our first responders. The shortage of police and fire personnel across Arizona and across the nation is disheartening, and I do have conversations with departments daily who are wanting to hire veterans and those who have not served. History tells us many of those who served in the armed forces came home and became first responders. Now, after almost 3 decades of war and current events, the thought of veterans becoming first responders is not as lucrative as it was in the past. What are the reasons? I truly have heard it all. Many mid-level jobs in the public sector are paying more than what is being paid to first responders and public safety personnel. These mid-level jobs also have less stress, little danger, and consistent hours. In my discussions with chiefs and HR staff across Arizona, I also realized that our rural communities are having to compete with the big city departments because of salaries, bonuses, and in some cases, cost of living and affordable housing. I know for a fact that the state of Arizona has many open positions, and we are competing for the same employees in our state prisons and DPS. Currently, we have about 1,700 openings in the state. And in fact, I just finalized a job fair in Flagstaff on September 8th to try to recruit for state jobs. So we're also competing not only at a local level, but at a state level for jobs. So what is the fix? I honestly don't know. Can agencies afford to sustain large overtime costs to provide protection to our communities? If we have less police and fire paying into PRPS, can this retirement system absorb the loss? My closing thoughts are as follows. We need to figure a way to take the lead in supporting our first responders and public safety personnel by showing our support and appreciation for those who serve in our communities. Sometimes feeling like people care about you and your families will go a long way in making someone feel appreciated. Compensation. Not sure what the right answer is. However, I have learned money talks. Since we are losing staff for better pay, compensation packages most likely need to be improved. Recruiting and retention. This is a statewide problem, and again, I don't have the answers, but hear about it every day. What do you do to make someone want to come to work every day, and how do you make them want to stay with your organization? In closing, I want to say I commend you all as our city leadership for having this discussion. It's not an easy task. I have been blessed to call Prescott home for 57 years. As a former business owner, if I ever needed a police officer, there was one that came when I called. If I called fire, there was always a big red truck to show up in a nick of time. I have known countless first responders and public safety personnel throughout the years, and we have always had the best of the best serving in our city. I know our city leadership is going to do what's best for our community. I also know that you will do what is best for those who protect our families and friends and save those who are in bad situations. Our first responders have chosen to be in a tough profession and are proud to put on the uniform every day and serve the citizens of Prescott, Arizona. These men and women are my heroes, and that is one of the many reasons I am proud to call Prescott my hometown. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Patrick.
Ann Wenzel.
Wow, that's a tough one to follow. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm Ann Wenzel. I'm a local CPA. This is the first time I've ever been to a council meeting, so I really applaud you guys. Very professional. Thank you. I'm speaking not only for a lot of my clients, my neighbors, but I'm also a member of Kiwanis and Rotary in this town. So I have my fingers in a lot of places. I just want to say that, we're all seeing the violence and the crime increasing everywhere. And I am amazed at how amazing our police and fire here deal with that, and I appreciate that greatly. But I do believe that it's going to start spreading to smaller towns and rural areas. We've all recognized that this is a national, state, and local issue. I think that we should be proactive instead of reactive. Reactive is too late. Proactive, we get ahead of it. I applaud Chief Bonnie and Chief Dora for recognizing that, and I support them wholeheartedly. I urge you to support both our police and fire departments with their increased funding or benefit package, whatever they need to keep this community safe and moving forward. This community benefits when our community is safe, our businesses do well, our economy thrives, and our residents are very happy and healthy, and we enjoy a lot of tourism, good tourism. I also want to remind everyone that IRS is hiring 87,000 new agents, and we're going to have to compete with that as well. So please support them in any way they can, and I'm willing to do my part at helping this community figure out solutions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Anything else?
That's all, Mayor.
All right, then I think we've concluded this study session. The next
We have
item.
one more item.
Item
What?
B,
Oh,
the stage.
yeah, the next item on the study session. So the next item on the study session will be
Presentation and discussion regarding the city's portable event stage.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Tim Legler, Deputy Director of Recreation Services. So, I just hit a button. Let's try that one. So we wanted to take the time and talk to you guys about the city's portable stage. In this year's budget, there's money to replace that stage, but we felt to have an honest conversation with you guys about the stage and so on. So kind of run through some slides. We purchased the original stage in 1997. At the time of the purchase, the goal was to have the portable stage available for the events promoters. Now, this is prior to the downturn in the economy and everything, so the city was very heavily involved in events and ran a lot of events. Over the life of the stage, it's been used approximately 500 different events. It even leaves the not recent, but it's left the area down to Camp Verde, Cottonwood, done events down there. The stage is well past its life and needs constant repairs. So the use of the stage in this year, 20 events, 9 with extensions. And when I say extensions, this is where we extend the stage beyond the normal structure. And we'll get in a little detail of that. So 2021, we had 14 events. With the COVID in 2020, we had 6 events. In 2019, we had 18 events. So annually, we provide the stage for free of charge to 5 signature events: Veterans Day Parade, Christmas, Holiday Light Parades, Rodeo Parade, and 4th of July event. The expenses. So annually, maintenance ranges from $4,000 to $8,000. It just depends on which issues we have that year. Setting up the stage without extensions or lights costs about $600. This is 2 employees, the operation of the truck to transport the stage wherever we're going. That's a local thing. Full setup with extension and lights, anywhere from $2,100 to $3,000. It depends on basically the feature of where we're putting it, where we're trying to get it, space and everything else. So this is 6 to 7 employees. We have to take 2 trucks out there, one for the stage and one for all the extensions and stuff for that. So in FY20, $4,925 with an expense of $10,530. FY21, $2,850 for the income, and the expense was $2,250. The expense on that, there's a lot of repairs that had to be done that year. And then same as we move into 22, $3,775 with $35,100 expense. There's a lot of labor also into that. Just briefly, some pictures. This is the guy setting it up. This is a full setup with the extensions. So as you can see, it takes about 7 people to get this done safely. And it takes anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. This is just some wear and tear on this. So we rebuilt the stage extensions, which is where the person's hands on there. But we still end up having the gap there, which creates a trip hazard on top of the stage. So we try to cover that with any kind of filament, from the carpet to we actually use duct tape to seam them together to try to make it smoother. On the right-hand side, that picture there, that's actually the cover on the outside of the stage that has the picture of the thumb butte. It's starting to peel apart and fade. This piece on the right-hand side is completely sunburnt, and then you can see it starting on the left-hand side there. So kind of the discussion points is portable stage rentals are available from private sectors. When you Google stage rentals, you can come up with about 3 or 4 different companies locally. That's not putting a lot of time into that. Some local events are currently renting from these companies because they don't like the setup of ours, the amplification, the sound. Could be lights they don't like or something. So really the question is, we've budgeted $250,000. Do we use that money to purchase a new stage? And then do we auction off the stage with the hope that a local entrepreneur will purchase it and continue to offer it for rent in the local area? So I got some quotes on, just quick quotes on the stage, and we're looking about $250,000, $260,000 for a similar stage. Obviously, we'd try to find a stage that's less labor intensive to set up, but we're still up in that $250,000 mark. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quick question. You said one of the options there is portable stage rentals. Do you have an idea of what those would cost the city, or like on a per basis usage?
So I'm not really going that direction that the city would rent it. That's where we would put the event promoters.
I see. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just have a question about the private entrepreneurs that have stages. Have you come up with a number as to how much it would cost instead of purchasing a new stage if we just outsourced it and rented a stage so we didn't have to use all the personnel and equipment?
So that kind of what Councilman Montoya is saying. So we're not looking at actually renting it ourselves. We're actually looking at having the people putting on the events rent it directly from them. So we would provide a list of, here's who you can rent a stage from.
Okay.
So we'd get out of that.
Get out of the stage rental
Correct.
business. Okay. Thank you.
What about our signature events?
that would be the one where we actually go rent the stage.
Well, I mean, just looking at the revenue versus expenses, this thing's going into the tank real fast. So if we're losing $30,000 a year and repairs are increasing, I don't think we can keep this rolling much longer at all.
Correct.
So if the question is, we're going to have to retire this, and, you know, do we invest another $250,000 into a new stage? Clearly, I think the charging for the use of that stage has been completely inadequate. We've been giving this away, and we should have been charging more all along. But, you know, that's water under the bridge.
Sure.
We're only really using 3 or 4 signature events a year. Seems to me like we're better off just outsourcing and making sure that we have a reserve for those stages so they're available for those signature events when we need them.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know that we're putting an undue burden on event holders by making them get their own stage.
No, like I said, there's some that already do it because they don't like the way ours is set up for acoustics, lighting, whole nine. Some people use it because it's cheaper, it's available, or signature events. Some signature events, just to throw out there too, like the rodeo parade, it's not necessarily we need a stage for that. We just need an elevated platform. So we have other avenues for that as well.
Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. It's kind of unfortunate that your presentation follows what we just talked about. You know, it's hard to justify spending $250,000 on a stage when we're talking about how urgent our needs are for police and fire and the need for more money. But I think we need to balance the needs of the city. Recreation and tourism is a very, very important part of our city. And if you look at the history, you've got to amortize this cost over 25 years. The stage you have, we've had for 25 years. You buy a stage for $250,000, and if it lasts us 25 years, then and you've had 500 events, then that stage has cost us about $500 per event. That's a very reasonable cost, and so I think it's a reasonable request. I just think we need to look at balance, and it certainly doesn't make any sense to keep the current stage. We need to ditch that as soon as we can. That's just a money pit. But I think your request is appropriate. It adds value to our city through recreation, and it provides a service to our community and to the residents of our community, to the tourists of our community. So I just want to have a balanced approach.
Mayor, if I could, I just wanted to point out that in 1997, there were very few events. Our tourism was not nearly as robust as it is now. And the intent was that if we were to get a stage, we could help build those events. Well, I think we've gotten past that point. And maybe it's time for us to step out of the way of the private sector, since they've stepped up to this a little bit more, and let them fill that gap. As the mayor pointed out, we would need to rent the stage for our events as well, but I think overall it's probably going to be more cost effective for the taxpayers to do that.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would expect back in '97, there weren't a whole lot of places you could reach out to rent a stage, and there probably weren't that many events happening for our private sector to step in and provide that service. But clearly, we have so many more events now that I would expect that there are probably enough for an entrepreneur to be able to provide that service on a pretty regular basis. Am I correct?
Yes.
And we've even been at the point where there's competing events where one has scheduled the stage ahead of the other, and then another one wants a stage, and then they go out and find that there are stages available to rent. Whiskey Off-Road rents a stage. Ours is used there as well. The Imagine Festival, which happened a couple months ago, they rent their own stage. So it's more and more common.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I agree. If there's, the situation's changed, and now we have an opportunity to support private entrepreneurs, to support these events, and maybe just step back and let them take care of the business, and we can focus on other things.
I mean, we always have the option, if that doesn't turn out to be that viable, come back a year or two from now and resubmit your request. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to clarify what I feel like I'm hearing from you, Joe, and from you, Mr. Legler, is that you don't necessarily see the need for us to go and, even though this item is budgeted, you don't see us the need, the value isn't there, or am I reading too much into what you're saying?
No, Councilman Montoya, I think that from 1997 to the present day, there's a lot more private sector companies that can fulfill the requests for a stage. And, for us to step out of the way and save the taxpayers some money might be prudent.
Okay. I just appreciate that clarification because as often is the case, we sit up here and we kind of look to you guys, just as we did in the last presentation, to you guys as the subject matter experts. So it's kind of, I know you walk that fine line when it comes to budget requests, and I appreciate that, but it's also good to kind of know where your sense of things is so that it can give us better guidance.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for analyzing this situation and being proactive. And I think it might be a way for us to save some money and reuse it someplace else.
Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
Well, I think we kind of cleared that one up. I think that will conclude our study session for today, and that gives us about another 40 minutes before our voting session at 3 o'clock. So thank you all for attending, and if you want to hang around till 3, we'll see you then.